Where were you living at the time?
I was living in Falmouth, Maine. I had graduated from high school that year.
Why did you join?
I still can't answer that question. It just, in those days, at midnight they used to play the national anthem on TV, and they stopped broadcast. They didn't broadcast 24 hours a day. And I can remember that at one point I got just feeling patriotic, I guess, and would stand up and at attention, what I thought was attention, and that led to me going downtown one day and talking with the recruiters. But I had gone earlier as a high school student. My friend had quit school and joined the Navy. So while I was still in high school, after he had done that, I went and talked to them. The Army would have taken me easily. The Navy sort of wanted to talk me out of it, but they would have taken me. But the Air Force didn't even want to talk to me. They just told me, graduate from high school, then we'll talk to you. But you have to remember, the Air Force never had to have a draft. I mean, they always had volunteers, where the rest of the organizations had to draft.
Why did you choose the Air Force?
Well, I chose the Air Force because I got thinking afterwards, they're the ones who were more interested in me, rather than we just want somebody to come out here and, it's a 9-to-5 job, and I don't like getting muddy and dirty and getting shot at.
After you enlisted, did you leave immediately for basic training?
I don't remember how soon after, but I do remember going home and telling my parents that I'd signed up, and
Oh, they didn't know you were going to do this?
no, they didn't know. We didn't have a lot of money, and they couldn't afford college. So they were going to send me to what at that time they called Southern Maine Vocational Technical Institute to learn electronics. So they had put money, they'd already given them some of the tuition. I don't know how much they put down. And then I up and left, joined the service. Well, they were quite concerned they weren't going to get the money back. They did. But, 18 years old, you don't think about those things.
Where did you go for your basic training?
San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base.
And what was that like?
It was sort of a cakewalk. Basing it upon the Marines' basic training and the Army's basic training, it was sort of a cakewalk. I mean, I remember getting off the bus and these dudes in uniform hollering and screaming at us and calling us hoss. They get right in your face. Hoss, what are you doing? I told you to stand over there. And, nobody really hollered at me except my parents in the past, and it was kind of scary. They gave us, we had to be in bed on time, and when they told us we had lights out at whatever time, I don't remember what the times were, but 9 o'clock, the lights are out at 9 o'clock, you better be in bed, and lights had better be out. And that's all there is to it. You couldn't smoke when you wanted to. At that time I smoked. You couldn't smoke when you wanted to, and we marched and did exercise and went through classes, how to dismantle guns and all that stuff. Some of the people went through a gas chamber type thing to get them just to know how to put the mask on and get it on correctly. I never had to do that. They sent me to guard the firing range. I don't know why I was lucked out, maybe because I never caused any trouble. Although my records showed that the drill instructor had to talk to me 2 different times.
For what?
I don't remember what it was for. He never did. I never was called in to be talked to. But I'm assuming it just made him look good that he'd done it. the jump. It was pretty easy.
How long were you in San Antonio for basic?
I don't remember. I'm thinking 1 month, but I don't remember. But the rest of my training I had at Keesler Air Force Base.
And where's that?
Biloxi, Mississippi.
How long were you there?
I think I think the entire course was a 32-week course. I don't remember for sure. So we were there for probably a month or two before I actually got into class. And then I remember at one point we had a break, but I don't remember exactly how long I was at Keesler.
Now, what was the training at Keesler for?
The training at Keesler, of course, was finishing our basic training, which mostly was marching and exercise. I don't think we did much more than that.
So you weren't specializing in anything yet?
Well, I went to Keesler for electronics, which they promised me. And that's what I got. So I went there to become what they called a ground radio repairman, which really was control tower radios from the airport control tower to the aircraft.
Had you had any prior experience with electronics?
Not really, but my parents needed me to do something to not cause trouble. So my uncle had a National Radio Institute home study course, which he had completed, and he just saved all the books and everything. So they ended up giving that to me, and I went through the entire thing, which I enjoyed that kind of stuff. And they had little kits that he had worked on and then torn apart and put back in the boxes. So I was able to do build the little tiny radios that they had and little circuits and see how they work. And so yeah, I was interested in that kind of stuff.
So what was the electronics training like? How basic was that?
That was right from they started off making sure you knew a little bit of math, and started talking about resistors and how they make resistors and how they rate them and what materials they're made of, right from basic electronics right up to tubes. Because in those days, we were in the semiconductor time. Let me tell you a little story about coming out of basic training. It has nothing to do with the military other than I was in uniform. They put me on a train to Biloxi, from San Antonio to Biloxi, Mississippi. And one of the guys, I didn't know him, but one of the guys was an Afro-American. And that didn't mean anything to me, so we sat on the train together. And I noticed people looking at us, but I thought because we were in uniform, hey. So he and I at one point went to the dining car, and they had given us some chit type thing to give to pay for our food. So we ordered our food and ate, and when we got done we gave them our chits, and they wouldn't take them. So between he and I, we didn't have much money, but we had enough just barely to pay for the food, so we did. And an Army major came over, had been sitting there with his wife, I assume it was his wife, in the dining car, and came over and talked to us, and mostly to my friend. And I really had no idea what was going on. And he asked him, he said, "Are you having trouble?" And the kid said, "Yeah, they didn't want to take our money." And the major said, "Well, okay, here's my address, here's my phone number. When you get to your base, you put in for this, and if they don't pay you for your meal, even though we were supposed to use those chits, if they don't pay you, then you contact me and I'll make sure you get paid. And the problem was, it was a white guy with a black guy. It was the problem. We got into Biloxi, and there was a sign saying, here's a number to call. We called the number, and they said, well, it's going to be an hour or so before we can get a bus out there. So take a walk, come back in an hour or so. So he and I did. We were starving by this time. And I remember walking through the town, Biloxi, Mississippi. My stomach was growling, his stomach was growling, and we came to a lunch counter type thing. And I said, let's go in and get something to eat. No. You go in if you want. I'll meet you down the road. I said, no, we're going to go in. To me, we were going to go in together because I knew he was hungry. He said, no, I'm not hungry. So I didn't eat because he didn't eat. I still didn't realize that the problem was he couldn't go into that lunch counter in those days. It was 1960.
So neither of you ate, and then you went back to
So neither one of us ate, and we finally walked back to the train station and got on the bus and went to the base.
Do you remember any of your instructors from basic training?
No.
When you finished with your training in Keesler, where did you go?
They sent me to Taiwan.
Well, you went directly from Keesler to Taiwan? Did you
Correct.
have any kind of leave in between?
I probably did, I don't remember.
And what was your duty in Taiwan?
Repairing electronic equipment. They sent me, if I remember correctly, it was the 868th Tactical Missile Squadron, which was a Matador missiles at those time, in those days. Those missiles, they said that if the Chinese were to lob their missiles over, by the time we realized they were coming, we would have 5 minutes, which would have given us time to launch our missiles, but it would have taken our missiles 15 minutes to get over to where we wanted to shoot them to land. So they eventually disbanded the outfit. I assume they put different missiles in there, but my outfit was disbanded.
So what did you do with the missiles while you were there?
I never had anything to do with the missiles. I just repaired electronic communicating equipment. In those days, they had teletype and facsimile machines, and I don't know where all of this equipment was. I assume throughout Taiwan. We had a small, at the end of a lot where our building was, at the end of a lot was the runway, and we had a small building there with a facsimile machine. I don't remember what all was in there. We had to go and they had meters, current readings and voltage readings. Every hour we had to go up there and write down these readings to make sure that the equipment was working properly. And if it wasn't, we'd pull one out and put a new one in, and so everything was always working. And then I'd take them to shop and work on them. Other people were doing the same thing throughout wherever they were, and my shop was getting the equipment. It was all bench repair.
How long were you at Taiwan?
I don't remember.
Are we talking weeks or months?
Months. Because my outfit was disbanded, I left early. Normally it would have been, for a single person, it would have been 1 year. For the married people, it was 18 months, I think. I think it was 18 months. So I wasn't there a year when they disbanded our outfit. They then sent me to the Philippines.
And what did you do in the Philippines?
In the Philippines, they told us that we couldn't tell anybody, we were going on a secret mission, we were going to be in Vietnam.
What year was this, Wayne?
1961. I want to say May of 1961.
Did they tell you what the secret mission was?
The secret mission was to go to Vietnam. Supposedly, my recollection says that the United Nations had agreed to allow 30,000 American troops in Vietnam. Had to do with the French Indochina War, and the petition in 1954 and all that. So we had surpassed the 30,000. The first people who surpassed the 30,000 Americans that went over there were not allowed to wear the uniform. My group, I don't know when they changed that policy, but my group, because it was pretty much general knowledge, although nobody admitted it, we were way over the 30,000 limit. They allowed my group to go in uniform. We were told that if we were captured, records would show that we had been discharged in the Philippines. And as far as the U.S. government was concerned, they didn't know how we got over to Vietnam had we been captured. That was what we were told.
Did you know what you would be doing in Vietnam?
No, not really. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to go out and no disrespect to the Army and the Marines, be a ground pounder. You know, I knew I wasn't going to be sludging through the rice paddies and all that and trying to...
So you knew you'd be doing something with electronics?
I knew I'd be
and
doing,
on the
right,
base.
right.
So where and when did you actually arrive in Vietnam?
It was sometime, I think it was sometime in May of 1961.
Where did you land?
Well, we had a double secret mission. There was a lot of bartering, swap and trade and barter and amongst people who had things or could get things. Our airplane, it was a military aircraft, had some stuff with a tarp over it. We weren't supposed to look at it. And they told us that we were going to stop on the way to Saigon. We were going to make a stop someplace, and they didn't tell us where, and I don't know where it was, and offload some equipment. So we did, and I don't know where it was. And it turns out that equipment was slot machines. So we offloaded. They sent us off the airplane, and we stood outside and waited for them to offload the slot machines. Got back on and was told again, don't say anything about this. And then we flew to Saigon.
And you landed
We
in
landed
Saigon?
at Ton Sin Nhut Air Base in Saigon.
What was your initial reaction
To
landing in Vietnam when you got off the
awful,
plane?
awful, awful hot. Oppressively hot.
Where did you go once you landed?
They had somebody to pick us up at I was going to say the main terminal, but it was a military flight. They just had somebody pick us up and take us to wherever. I don't remember where we actually went when we first got there, but we all were assigned to different places. And we had our orders. I was assigned. The only thing I remember was a detachment 2. I believe, I did a little bit of research on this the other day. I believe it was the 505th Tactical Control Squadron, something like that. But I didn't know all that. All I knew was we were detachment 2. And we worked on control tower radios.
So where were you actually stationed? Right there at
Right there at
Ton
Ton Sin Nhut. You have to remember that even though we had 30,000 troops, they were scattered throughout the country. I think in 1960, I think the Viet Cong blew up the Bien Hoa Air Base. And I think after that is when we started building up pretty big. And I think that's why they had a detachment rather than an actual squadron or wing or whatever there.
How long did you work with the control tower radios at Consuno?
All the time I was there. I don't remember how long I was there. I think I was there about 9 months. I tried to extend, but they wouldn't let me extend.
You wanted to stay?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think, that was about the time that our government admitted that our troops, our Army and Marines, may be shooting back at the Viet Cong, but they only did it when they were being specifically shot at. How they knew it was them that the bullet was aimed at, I don't know, but anyhow, that was their talk. So we really weren't too much involved in actually fighting, I don't think, at that time. I don't think anybody had been captured, any Americans had been captured by that time. I don't think we worried about that in those days too much.
So after your 9 months, where did you go?
I went to Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana.
How long were you at Barksdale?
A couple of years. I was trying to get back to Vietnam.
What were your duties at Barksdale Air Force Base?
I was assigned to, I believe it was a 46th Communications Squadron, which at that time was, the Barksdale Air Force Base at that time was headquarters 2nd Air Force. Today it's headquarters 8th Air Force, but in those days it was headquarters 2nd Air Force. It was a SAC base, Strategic Air Command. My job, the section I was working in, dealt primarily with PA systems. If any of the officers had speaking engagements anyplace, downtown or on the base, we would set up the microphones and the speakers, and we did, that's all we did all the time. I remember one of the colonel in charge of communications, I don't remember his official title, had a daughter that was into ballet. And every time she had a recital open to the public, that we had to set up the equipment. And normally that was at night, and that meant that even though we had a normal day job, now we couldn't be going downtown carousing because we had to be there to set up the equipment for the recital, which we weren't happy about.
Now, you said that the 2 years you were at Barksdale, you were constantly trying to get back to Vietnam. Why did you want to go back to Vietnam?
I enjoyed what little I knew of the people. I enjoyed the culture there. I enjoyed the people. I wasn't able, at that time I wasn't able to learn. I tried to learn, but I couldn't learn Vietnamese the first time. But I had had French in high school, and I didn't really pass it, but I had had French in high school. So I used what French I remembered, and a friend of mine was a French Canadian, and of course he spoke French. So, and their second language was French at that time. Most Vietnamese did not speak English. So you could talk to anybody. If you spoke French, you could talk to just about anybody. Their official second language was, the kids, everybody had to go to school to learn French.
So what happened after you finished at Barksdale? Where did you go next?
After Barksdale, I re-enlisted. I promised I would re-enlist if I...
So your enlistment term had expired?
Yes, in 1964. I had to write to my congressman from Maine, my senator from Maine, Margaret Chase Smith at the time. And I told her, I promised her that I would re-enlist if I could get back to Vietnam. My career field was frozen. They wanted to put me into computers because computers were getting to be the big thing then. So she ended up talking to some general and they did their thing. And I was called into the first sergeant's office and he asked me if I had political influence. I said no. He said okay. And he couldn't have done anything anyhow. I had orders to go to Vietnam and I went back to Saigon.
Did you have the same job when you returned to Saigon? What was
No.
your new job?
My new job was working with backpack radios.
Can you tell me some details about specifically what kind of radios and what the backpack radio was?
They were mostly radios that the GIs put on their strap on their back and walk around in the jungle. One of the radios was called Prick 71, PRC 71, and it had 4 different radios. They were real small. These radios were maybe that big. One of them was a VHF FM, another was a VHF AM, another was a UHF. The military uses UHF quite extensively, or did. And another was an HF single sideband, which is the type of radio that ham radio operators use. VHF AM is the radio that they normally use in normal aircraft for communications. So those are the type of radios. I worked on them. They had a bigger, the Air Force and the Army use a designation AN/Army Navy / and then PRC is like portable radio communications. ARC would be airborne radio communications. MRC is mobile radio communications. And I use them because those are the ones that I've always worked with, and then some number. So these PRCs, PRC 47 was an HF single sideband. It was a bigger radio, and the PRC 71 a group of 4 radios, and I don't know who used them. They just came to be broken and I fixed them. And
So what would a typical day be like on your job there?
be just like being here, going to work. I'd come in the morning. Whichever radio I was assigned, the PRC 41 for example, I would take one of the broken ones, open it up and find out what's wrong with it, fix it, sign it off, put it over in the good pile and go get another one all day.
So basically you worked a 9 to 5 and
Yep.
Were you free to do what you wanted when you were not on duty?
Yep.
Were you in Saigon the whole time you were there the second time?
No. No. They, in the beginning, we worked out of a Quonset hut and everything stored was in connexes outside. They eventually built some buildings, metal buildings, specifically for us and a bunch of other people, supply and whatever. So we moved from where we were at Tonsinet in Saigon to this other place at the same base. And then for some reason, they packed us up and sent us to Bien Hoa. The whole thing, everything.
Your whole unit, your whole
whole-
operation of
yeah.
repairing radios?
Yeah.
How far was Bien Hoa?
Bien Hoa, I don't know, 25, 30 miles away. We went from, when I went back, I don't know if it was an official designation. I believe it was, but I'm not sure. At the time, I thought it was unofficial. I thought it was just something people talked about. We didn't have any real supply system. We just bummed and borrowed and stole whatever we needed, resistors, capacitors, whatever. So that they called us pack rat. And I read someplace that that was an official designation, but I don't know that it was. We then went to become the 505th Tactical Maintenance. We came under 505th Tactical Control Squadron. And then we changed to I don't remember the designation, 5280th or 4280th Communication Squadron of some sort. And then we changed again to, a month later, to the 505th Tactical Control Maintenance Squadron. And the 505th were the people who dealt with with what they called air liaison officers and forward air controllers who worked with the Army. And they flew bird dogs, O1 bird dogs around, spotted enemy, would call in on their radios and to the ground. They would talk to the Army guys and they'd send their troops out to intersect the bad guys that were out there. And they did they were always flying. So when we changed to the 505th Tactical Maintenance Squadron, Tactical Control Maintenance Squadron, we then was moved to Benoit.
And what was the operation at Benoit like?
The same thing,
Quonset huts or buildings?
buildings.
But again, it was a 9 to 5, you show
Yeah.
up and you work on whatever radio.
Yeah.
How long were you at Benoit?
For another 2 years. I kept extending because the tour being single, the tour was 1 year. So I kept extending. And actually the first year they didn't, I had tried when I first went there in 1962 and they just flat said no. So when I went back in 64, I got a 6 month, I asked for a year, but I got a 6 month extension. And what I had told them both times was that I liked the duty and I liked the people, and I thought it would be better for me to be there than someone else who didn't like the people and the duty. Well, they didn't like that. So the second time I asked to extend my tour, I said, you know, we're getting $55 extra every month for combat pay, and I like that extra money, and I need it bad. I want an extension, and they said, you can have it, buddy. So they gave me a year extension. So I continued extending. I had a first sergeant at one time who despised the people, didn't like being over there, and told me not to bother extending, but I did. Put my paperwork in there, and I waited for a while, and you can tell how things are supposed to work once you've been around a little bit. And I didn't get my paperwork back, and what they were supposed to do was tell you either yes or no, and if no, here's the reason why. I mean, it may not have been a good reason, but here's the reason why. This is our decision, and that's the way it is. Well, I never got that paper back. So I went to the first sergeant and asked him about it, and he said, I told you I'd throw that in the trash. And I said, well, you can't do that. I said, you have to go by the regulations. That's why I like the military. You have to go by the regulations. He said, no, he said, you know, if you do it, he said, I'm just going to throw it in the trash. I said, well, I'd like permission to talk to the commanding officer, squadron commanding officer. He said, he's going to do whatever I tell him to do. And I said, that's okay, but I need to get it back why I was denied. And I said, if I can't talk to once I've talked to the squadron commander, if I don't get what I want, I'm going to go on up the chain of command. He says, put your paper back in. So I did, and I got my extension.
How long did you end up staying in Vietnam?
Military or civilian?
Well, both.
Total 10.5 years.
Now, can you tell me why that was?
way back when President Eisenhower was the president, General Eisenhower was the president, he made a comment that Americans overseas were the ambassador from their country. That people looked at them and saw what America was like. I'm not trying to tell you that I was a good guy all the time I was overseas. Most American GIs in particular aren't. We are good people, but we also cause problems, and get drunk and carouse around, and other people look at that, and that's what Americans are. It's kind of simplified. But anyway, he said that. And I was always brought up that people are people, and we're brothers and sisters, and we're all the same. I mean, cultures may be different, but we're still all the same. We all laugh in the same language. I saw written the other day, I don't know who wrote it. Children laugh in the same language, and that's the way I felt. But anyhow, so I figured I do like being there, and I also immersed myself in the culture. I tried to learn. I ended up learning to speak Vietnamese fairly fluently. I only know 2 people who spoke either better or had a better grasp of the language, more words than I. But when I did speak it, of course I had an accent, but I spoke it correctly. Theirs is a tonal language, so you say one word, with a rising tone means one thing, with a falling tone means another. So you couldn't, like we ask a question and always it ends up with a rising, you know what I mean? Well, that could change the meaning of the word. So tones were very important, and I took special care to try to learn those tones, which I did. Can't speak them now, but so in immersing myself in the culture, I liked the people, I liked the country. I felt it could be one of the stronger countries in that area.
How long were you at Benoit?
2 years.
And where did you go after that?
I got out of the service.
What year was that?
1968.
Were you actually discharged from the Air Force at that point?
No, they sent me to Travis Air Base, back in California. Because I spoke the language, to go back a little bit, because I spoke the language, and because I got along with the Vietnamese, Americans would generally call them names and talk down to them, and I never would. The Vietnamese, I don't know if they liked me or had respect or whatever, but they knew they could rely on me. So they would ask me to, when problems came up, they would ask me to try to help interpret for them, basically. And of course, it was always, I had to go to the first sergeant, and that one that didn't like me at all, that was one of the reasons. Because they looked at it as I was always sticking up for the Vietnamese. I was told at one time the guy was going to accuse me of insubordination. He kept telling me that Vietnamese weren't human beings, and I kept telling him they were. We had a big argument about it. I was just a 3-striker, I think, and he was a 5-striker. And I kept telling him they are. I said, if you need blood, and you're O positive and they're O positive, they'll save your life. Oh, no way, they're not people. We can't use their blood. I said, all right, let's go down to the hospital and talk to the doctors down there. Well, he knew that wasn't going to work. So he told me, then he told me, shut up, because he's going to get me for insubordination. Okay. So I was always doing things to help them. At Benoit, we had at the end, we had a double story barracks. And at the end of the barracks, we had a bar that they'd built. And we had a lady come in, an older lady, come in and bartend for us. And I used to drive her home at night to the Vietnamese section of the air base, which was off limits to Americans. We could go there if we were invited, but otherwise we weren't supposed to be there. So, a new first sergeant now, but again, I'm always going to him whenever the maids have a problem. Which means I'm the troublemaker. So I was going to Saigon from Benoit. I was traveling back and forth because I wasn't married at the time, but I had a girlfriend and we had a baby. So I had a motorcycle and I was going back to Saigon every night. And in the morning I'd drive back out to Saigon. So one day, on a weekend, the first sergeant came through the barracks. I don't know why. He pulled a barracks check. And I wasn't in my bunk. And he decided he was going to get me. So the next day, he was in the bar, Sunday, he was in the bar telling everybody he's going to get mine. I got Franklyn's ass. And so when I got in there, early Monday morning, real early, I was on time for work. The maid was there cleaning up. The bartender maid was cleaning up, and she said that he says he's going to get your ass. And she said, I've talked to my husband, and my husband says that you tell him that you were at our house. Of course, that area's off limits. You were at our house. We invited you over for dinner, and you and my husband drank, and you get a little tipsy, and so that's what I told the first sergeant. And she gave me a number to call. The Vietnamese have a system, military system works a little bit differently. This guy happened to be, wasn't the base commander, but as far as enlisted people are concerned, he was the top guy there. And my first sergeant called him and found out who he was, and there's nothing he could have done. It was sort of like political influence. There's nothing he could have done. He could have got me, but if he had this guy with the Vietnamese still had the authority over there, even though Americans thought they did. They could cause problems, I guess is a better way of putting it. So, all right, so he didn't get me then. So I went to Saigon.
Did he know that you were going to Saigon every night? Did he know that?
No, he didn't know that.
Oh, so he just happened to show up that one night
and I wasn't there. That's all. And he didn't pull a bed check again after that. So I don't know, but I went to Saigon to interview for a job, a civilian company. Of course, I went to see what later became my wife, but I went to interview for a job in Saigon, and when I came back, I don't remember how I got there. I didn't have my motorcycle, so I don't know why I had to fly back. I don't know why I didn't have it. But when I came back, I went to the base and was trying to get an Army helicopter back, and it just happened that my first sergeant was coming back from a trip to Hawaii, business. Pacific Air Force was the overall command of us, and he had gone there for that, to deal with them. He was coming back and he was getting a ride, and he saw me, and of course I'm not supposed to be there. And he offered nicely to put my name on the list to get a ride, and I said, no, I don't need that. I was sharp enough then to know what he was trying to do. No, don't do that.
What was he trying to do?
He was trying to get my name to prove that I was in Saigon. So I managed to, I bummed a ride with the military. They had there was a main road, I think it was Highway 1, part of Highway 1, which ran all the way up the coast. So I got out there and bummed a ride and got back there. So he saw me, but he couldn't prove anything.
Well,
so
how long did you commute unofficially between Saigon and Benoit?
almost all 2 years.
Every single night, and you never got caught?
Yeah.
How long had you been living with your wife-to-be? When did you meet her?
1966, I think.
So when you went back the second time?
Yeah.
Now, can you tell me what that was like?
Well,
Because I know that you later married your
Yeah.
girlfriend, and she's a Vietnamese. What were the relationships at that time? How did the Americans view it?
nobody was bothered with it because many guys were, quote, shacking up. So basically that's what I was doing. Most of the guys shacked up, lived with sometimes one woman for a week and then another woman for another week and whatever. Some guys stayed with the girl that they were with and went home. Some guys promised to marry the girl and that they'd be back, and they didn't. They never came back. Some of them would write letters. I remember reading to the girls or translating to the girls what their so-called boyfriend, fiancé had written, and they always, nobody ever came back. They always were, I'm sorry, I'm married, whatever.
But you did. You stayed.
I did, yeah.
With
And a few of us did, but yeah, I did.
So you actually did get to see your family every night and then go back to the base and work every morning.
Yeah.
What happened then when your term was up the second time? And you had to come back to the United States, did you bring your family with you?
No, I left her there. I told her I'd be back. I left her some money for a few months to pay the rent and food, etc., and told her I'd be back.
So how long did you stay at Travis Air Force Base before you did go back?
I don't remember how long I stayed, 2 or 3 days maybe, to finalize the discharge. I went home for a month, or roughly a month, and there was no communication between us at that point, my wife and I. And then I went to, must have been, I don't remember if they were in LA or San Francisco. I don't remember where the company was there. I went there and opened the door and says, I'm so-and-so and I'm ready to go. And they looked in their records, okay, and sent me over.
What company was this?
It was a company called Dyna Electron
Now, this was as a civilian.
as a civilian.
So had you lined this up? How did you know that,
This is the company that, from Benoit, that I'd gone and had the interview with in Saigon.
oh, so you knew you were gonna be hired as a civilian and be
They-
able to go back to Vietnam?
They told me that they would hire me, yeah. When we signed papers. And
So, as a civilian now, you went back to Vietnam in what year?
I left in 1968 and came back in 1968
As a civilian.
as a civilian.
Where did you live when you returned?
Well, they had a hotel that I could have gone to, but of course my wife was right there in our apartment that we were
In Saigon?
in Saigon. So that's where I stayed. They were going to send me someplace way up north where I asked a small base, and I asked them if I could bring my wife, and they said no. And then they said, well, we didn't know you're married. And because actually I wasn't married really at the time. I said, yeah, I got a wife and a kid here. And they said, no, you can't take her. I said, well, maybe she can go up there and I can just live off post. No, that won't work. It's too dangerous. So then they said, well, we'll send you to Vung Tau, which is a resort area. So they sent me to Vung Tau, and my wife and I packed everything up, put it on a bus, rented a bus, put everything in the bus, and had them drive us up to Vung Tau.
And how long were you there?
Um, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, Yeah, 4 or 5 years.
What were your duties with this new company while you were up at Downtown?
Same thing, radio repair. They, people in America were getting tired of the war, and they didn't like it. And to reduce our troops, the number of troops we had there, military troops, they would, in my case, I worked for the 258th Signal Detachment, I believe it was. I believe that's what it was, up in Wungtao. They took the Army, who normally, we had like a 13, I don't remember how many, 13 people, 12 people there, that normally the Army did this work on their radios for the helicopters. They sent those Army guys home and put civilians in there. So they did that all over the country.
So they were basically contracting out the Army work, so you were
Yeah.
still actually repairing Army and Marine?
I was repairing Army helicopter radios, communications equipment, and navigational equipment. And-
Now, did you ever have, so when you were over there for those several years, did you leave ever and come back to the United States?
No. No, I was having too much fun.
So, when did you leave Vietnam to come back to the United States?
In 1970, latter part of 1974.
So 1974, you returned to the United States?
I think it was 1974.
With your family?
Yes. By that time, I had 3 daughters.
Oh. Did you worry at all about the safety of your family? Because by now the war had been heating up. You'd actually been in Vietnam off and on for the entire period of the war. Was there ever an element of danger for your family?
During the Tet Offensive of 1968, there was, when I was living at Bien Hoa. I didn't mention, just before Tet of 1968, they had the Highway 1, which was a major highway. Military was going up and down there, and the military didn't care who was in their way. Not the military, individual drivers. Some of them would have fun chasing somebody off the road. I always thought that Highway 1 was dangerous for me to be on a motorcycle. So I took the back way up from Saigon through a little town just outside of Saigon, then on up through an area that the Vietnamese had an academy, military academy there, and on the back way into Bien Hoa. And I was going back sometime just before Tet, and a Vietnamese was following me. And I noticed he was following, looking in the mirrors. I noticed something wasn't right. So I eventually decided, what am I going to do? So I just pulled over and waited for him to come up, and he didn't speak any English, but remember I spoke Vietnamese. So I said hi and did the polite Vietnamese thing and asked him what's going on, and he asked me where I was going, and I told him, and what are you going to say? And he asked me if I carried a weapon. I said no, and he said, you really should. He said, there's a lot of stuff going on around here. Bad stuff from the Viet Cong, weapons movement and stuff. I said, well, I got to go to work. So he followed me. He said, okay. He said, I'll follow you. So he followed me. He had a gun. He followed me up to where he felt it was safe at Bien Hoa. And then he said, okay, I've got to go back. I'm late for work. He worked at the military academy as an instructor, as military. And basically he was escorting me up to make sure I was safe. He didn't know me. And I don't know if speaking Vietnamese, because that's all we spoke. I don't know, but anyhow, he escorted me up there and then went back to work. Tet came. Tet came right after that. I took my bike back. I was having problems with it and gave it to some guy to work on. I got myself back to Benoit, and that next weekend, Tet came about. So, excuse me. So we were not allowed to go off post or anything. I mean, everything was clamped right down. So I didn't know what was happening because, again, we didn't have a telephone. I had no way of communicating with her. So yeah, I was worried then, and I don't remember how long it was. I got a call on post. Somebody said there's a girl out there with a baby, and she's got something from me with my name on it. And you need to go see her. So I went to the Vietnamese gate, because we had American gate and the Vietnamese gate. Vietnamese came in here, Americans came in here. I went to the Vietnamese gate where she was, and she had made her way up to Benoit and had the baby. Excuse me. And during one of the part of the attacks, part of our roof had fallen in and whacked her on the head, but didn't hurt her. I mean, you know, just bruised her. And of course, she was worried that she didn't know what's happening up there, and she was running out of money. So I gave her I don't remember how much I gave her, but I gave her some more money and told her as soon as I can get out, I'll get out. And then I found a way to get out, because now I don't have a bike up there. I found a way to get out. I found a number of ways to get out. Where there's a will, there's a way. None of them posing any danger to us, you know, as far as somebody coming back in that same way. But I got out a number of ways, and I'd still go down there. At that point, I'd go down there every weekend. Then I was caught. And my first sergeant was going to court-martial me. And then he found out he couldn't court-martial me, which made him mad. And then he was going to give me an Article 15, which is like a misdemeanor. So I ended up talking to the military attorneys. He did give me an Article 15. In the end, I did get an Article 15, but in the meantime, I was under house arrest. Basically, the first sergeant said I can go to the barracks and I can go to work, and that's the only two places I can go. If I want to go to Chow Hall, for example, which is on the other side of the base, I had to ask permission, and he would find out what time I'm leaving, and I had to tell him when I came back. But because I'd lived in Saigon all that time before, and I drove, I wasn't afraid to drive. Most people, they drove kind of different than they do here in America. So the guys used to, when they wanted to have a PX run from Saigon, because Saigon had the big PX, they'd ask me to drive them down there, which I would. Well, I can't go off post now. Can't take you down there. So they all petitioned the first sergeant to let me drive. Well, he wasn't happy with that, so he gave one of my friends a gun, here, an M16. You guard him. He'll take you down there, he'll take you back, and he won't go anyplace but with you. If he does, shoot him. So I drove them down to Saigon and dropped them off, and then I went over to my place with my wife and kids, and at the appointed time went back, picked them all up, drove them back to Saigon, back to Benoit.
Wayne, while you were in the service, did you see any combat?
No, not really. They attacked Benoit. Working with the ALO facts, various times I was sent out to different posts. They sent me to Phuc Vinh one time, which at the time I thought it was next to Cambodia, but it isn't. It's close, but it's not next to it. And because if I go to a new place, I don't know the defenses. They were attacked, and because when I went out to any place, they gave me an M16 and a 38. But I don't know the defenses, so my thought was I'll just jump in this foxhole that's right here and wait it out, because they know, the Army knows what their defenses are. They know what to do. I don't want to be shooting some guy coming running out of the chow hall to man his post at the perimeter and shoot him. So I'm just going to sit down here with my M16 and my 38 and wait it out. And I remember one of the few combat experiences, I remember thinking, man, you know, you're pretty good under fire. Because my mind was thinking clearly, and you're pretty good. And first sergeant came around checking, and he's standing up in the foxhole, he's standing up there, and he says, "How you doing, soldier?" And I went to say, "Okay." I went, "Oh, okay." And he laughed and he says, "You'll be all right, soldier, you just hang in there." So I really was scared badly. But I was sent to the Hue Phu Bai area, which is up by the DMZ. I don't remember what I was doing, why I was there, but they put me in a small villa type place to sleep overnight. It had a small room, bedroom, and then an completely open area like this area here, and a bed here, and a bed here, and a bed here, and a bed here, and I think there was 6 of us in there. I had one of the beds. We'd all gone to bed, and a little ways away there was a village chief's home that the Viet Cong blew up. And we had what they called a double E8, which is a little hand crank telephone. You crank it and it rings someplace else, but it has to have wires connected to it. So when they blew up the village chief's place, that wiring went up and it caused our phone to go ring, and then it was dead. The minute that explosion went off, that leader of the group in that bedroom was up, out of bed, fully clothed, pants bloused in his boots laced up. Now I know he didn't sleep in his clothes. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't sleeping in his clothes. But somehow he was instantly up, dressed and out, and telling you, okay, you take guard duty over there, you take guard duty over there, you relieve him at such an hour. I mean, he was just bing, bang, bada, boom. That's their job, of course, but I was quite impressed with it. Very, very impressed. And I was scared. And I remember taking that M16 and he told me just go back to sleep. And of course I couldn't. And I remember taking that M16 and putting it underneath the blanket with me. And, oh, so nice. And I went to sleep. Now I'll tell you another, no, I guess I won't tell you that one.
You can if you want.
It really isn't a combat thing. I was in the Hue area again. I went to Hue a couple of times. After Tet. I'm not sure, even sure it was after Tet. I'm not sure it was after Tet. I went up there one time and everything was off limits. I don't know why, I don't remember why. Everything was off limits. And I didn't have a vehicle. And I was talking with one of the Army guys and, man, I'd like to go downtown. I mean, gee, nothing to do in the evening. And he said, well, I can get hold of a Jeep, but it would be off limits. Well, it's up to you. They're not going to do anything to me. So he says, all right, let's go. So we went downtown. And we happened to be in this one bar, and the MPs came in. And there was he and I was there. We're off limits. And they said, okay, you guys get back to your base, and I don't want to see you downtown. So we drove around, was heading back, and we stopped at a stop, I don't remember if it must have been a stop sign, and there was some Vietnamese airborne. And I said to them, in Vietnamese, oh, airborne. Hi guys, how are you? Or something like that. So this kid came over, and we got talking, and we decided that we would pay for his drinks if he would go with us. So he says, sure. So we went around town, and we ended up back at that same bar that we were caught at, and the MPs came in again. But the catch was, if you had your counterpart, if you were working with Vietnamese and you had your counterpart, you were okay, you could be downtown. So this guy happened to get up and leave for a minute when the MPs came in, but his drink was there on the table. And well, right off, he starts hollering at us, and we, oh no, we got a counterpart here. Well, where is he? Well, that's his drink. Well, you know, anybody, you could buy 3 drinks. But then this guy came over, the Vietnamese came over. The Vietnamese didn't speak any English. So when the American MP tried to talk to him, he couldn't talk, so I had to talk back and forth. So it looked like we had worked together, and I mean, you'd think that here's this American-speaking Vietnamese to what he calls his counterpart, must be his counterpart. So the cop said, okay. The MP said, okay.
So you stayed?
So we stayed.
Wait, I'm going to ask you some questions now about daily life. When you were overseas, how did you stay in touch with family?
I didn't.
You didn't at all?
No.
The entire 10 years?
In the military, I didn't, and my mother was worried, and she must have talked to my brother, who in turn called or wrote somebody in the military. I don't know who. I don't know who he called, but I got called into an office in the personnel department, and was told that asked about writing. I said, well, you know, I try to, but I keep forgetting. And they said, well, your family is worried about you. You will write. Henceforth, yes, sir. And I did write. Not as often as I should, but I did write.
What was the food like? Well, you were actually there at 2 different times. What was it like when you first went in 1960 and then when you went back in 64? How had things changed in general with the living conditions?
In 1962, they had problems with probably just about everything. But I can remember a time when all they had was hamburger meat. That's all they had for meat. But our cooks would find different ways to cook it. We might have patties one day, we might have meatloaf another day. I don't remember all the different ways they cooked it. To make it look like it was something different, to give it a little variety. They did a very, very good job. The rest of the food, what we had, probably the vegetables was local. But I don't know about the meat. But I do know they couldn't get meat, so they just gave us hamburger. But they did such a good job that I don't remember anybody complaining. Afterwards, we had a chow hall. Afterwards, we, of course, had a chow hall, but everything was a lot more modern. And we just like going to a cafeteria today.
Did you always have enough supplies for fixing the radios and things like that?
No. No, when the second time I was there, we, being called pack rats, most of our stuff we got by bumming and borrowing. I can remember going over to Long Bin, which is outside of Benoit, to the Army community radio shops, borrowing, getting stuff, resistors, or whatever we needed. But we had a commanding officer and I guess he was a first sergeant, come in. And they knew each other from working together before. And they decided that we were going to utilize the supply system, which we said doesn't work. And they said, well, we'll make it work. And they did. Within 6 months, we ended up being able to get, because they forced us to do the paperwork and wait for the part to come in. And within 6 months, we had a supply system that was, I've never seen one any better.
Did you feel pressure or stress?
I didn't know that I did. I guess you have to remember now, I'm not out there fighting. I'm not normally being attacked. But I do remember going to Thailand one time, the first time I went, and in a strange part of, well, Thailand was strange to me anyhow, but in a taxi in the outskirts of Bangkok, and narrow streets and millions of people, and realizing that, whoa, you're not, I feel it's like pressure lifted off of me. So I realized at that point that I had been stressed, but I never knew it, I didn't know it at the time. I was having too much fun.
Did you do anything special for good luck?
No. When we were being attacked, I was born a Christian, and I somehow moved away from not necessarily Christianity, but being a practicing Christian. And going over there, most of them were Buddhists. Not all of them, probably 80% of them were Buddhist. When I was scared, I remember sitting in the bunker. They were shooting rockets in, and I knew that bunkers weren't fail-proof. That they didn't guarantee that you're going to be okay, because we had one of the bunkers, not mine. They had kind of like an L-type device where to get in you had to come in a little entranceway, and one of the rockets had come in just right in that little area that they could get right into the bunker. It came in and exploded and blew everybody up inside. Another one came in, went through the roof of the bunker, had PSP, which is a metal grating type thing that they use for airplanes to land on to make it a solid base. It went through there and got stuck and then blew up. Or blew up as it was getting stuck, I don't know. So I knew that these bunkers may not save me, and everybody had their own way of doing things. My way was to pray to Buddha that if you had anything for me in the future, don't let me die now.
What did people do for entertainment?
Well, of course, they had the Bob Hope shows
Did you
once a
see
year.
any?
No, I didn't think it was safe. As far as I know, throughout the country, and every year he went there, they never attacked when he was performing. But my thought was that would be a good time to attack, because you've got all those Americans there. If you want to kill a bunch of them, that'd be a good time. So I would not go. As I didn't go to the movies because we had movies there. Most of the time I didn't go because I figured this is an area where there's hundreds of GIs. So otherwise, but I did go to the Enlisted Men's Club. And I did go, of course, went downtown all the time.
What did you do when you were on leave?
I never went on leave.
You didn't get any
Not-
leave when you were...
Not when I was in Vietnam. I just didn't take leave. I was having too much fun. No, I really enjoyed the Vietnamese, but you've got to remember, once I got there, I studied, I read up on everything I could. I tried to learn the language. The second time I was there, I did learn the language, and I'd go out. I'd go outside of Saigon, wherever I was. I would go outside in any place. I didn't really care. I mean, I didn't go into known enemy territory, but talking with people who'd never been involved with Americans, but I was speaking Vietnamese. I just liked the culture. I'd have always wanted to go to China, even as a little kid. I don't know why, but I always have, and I never have been to China, other than Taiwan.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
I don't remember what year it was, but I went up to, they were building up the forces. There was talk that the Viet Cong wanted, or North Vietnam wanted to cut the country in half, and Highway 19 was just about the half point of South Vietnam. Not of all Vietnam, but just South Vietnam. And they had a special forces camp up there. They had, can't remember the name of it now. Pretty well known base up there, Army base. So they sent, we had M151 Jeeps with airborne radio stuff in it. High frequency VHF and UHF in it. And so they put us where all these airplanes were landing, dropping off troops. They put us there, and at nighttime there was nobody. There was just us. I think there was 3 or 4 of us. And we just camped out. And then the next morning we manned our Jeep, which basically was a control tower. And we told them what the barometric setting, what their barometric setting should be, what it was on the ground. And when they got off the airplane, I don't know where they went. They were taken someplace. So the first night we stayed there was okay. That morning, the special forces came by and they wanted to know what we were doing there. And well, this way we've been sent. They told us to man this airport. Ah, you can't do that. It's enemy territory. So they said, you stay here today. During the daytime it's safe, it's secure, but when nighttime it's open to anybody. So at night we'll come back, we'll get you, we'll take you to the Special Forces compound that they had. All right, so we left a little bit early while it was still daylight and set up a tent. And I was supposed to be at one end holding right in the center, the tallest pole. But there was a Montagnard family living there, just a little ways off, and they don't dress like we do. And I remember holding the pole and looking over here, and 2 young ladies came out. They were bare from the waist up. I'm a young man now. Whoa, look at that. Wow. And they went over to a little well and they were taking a bath, basically. And I'm going and the pole, and I don't even know the pole's going, and I hear somebody hollering at me, hollering and hollering, and my NCO came running around. Franklyn, what the hell are you doing? And then we both had to grab him. Oh, I'm sorry, dude, I was looking at that.
What did you think of the officers, and what did you think of your fellow soldiers?
Most of them really were professional. There was always some. We had a, I'm going to be telling it myself now. We had a commander at one time who every commander's call he was, I'm going to say, religious. Every commander's call he would talk to us about Christianity and how we're supposed to be good people and not supposed to go out and with hookers and all this stuff. And he put everything that had any booze, any beer, because they didn't sell booze, but beer, put it all off limits to us, to his squadron. And in the end, we all complained. In the end, the base commander says, I'm the one that puts things off limits, not you. But his driver would take him off post to a place that was off limits, but next door to the off limits was a headquarters where he had business. I used to go down to that place because some of the women were loose. But once he came, I would find his Jeep down there and his driver waiting for him to come out to one of these places. But in the meantime, every commander's call, he's telling us these no good, bad, bad, bad. So he may have been a very good soldier, but I thought him as a hypocrite. I had a first sergeant in the States that used to climb out. Our barracks the second story had a ledge, and he used to climb up on that ledge and walk around peeking in the windows to see that we weren't drinking beer or doing what we shouldn't do. I wasn't happy with him either. I wasn't happy with the sergeant that told me the Vietnamese weren't human beings. But most of them did not like the Vietnamese, did not like being there away from their family, didn't like the heat, didn't like anything at all about Vietnam. Most of them talked down to them, called them names, and of course called me names because I was always sticking up for them. But as far as their job is concerned, most of them were.
What was your highest rank?
Staff Sergeant, E5. Oh, that's another funny story. By this time I found out Bangkok was a nice place to go, so I was taking an R&R to Bangkok. Before I left, we had to work late one night. We normally work, 8 hours, and then, even though it's a combat zone, we worked 8 hours and went home. So we had to work late that night, and there was a curfew in town put on by the Vietnamese, and therefore we had to abide by it. This is in Saigon. So I worked with one of the guys that worked with us was a civilian tech rep. And he said, after we get done here, do you want to go to the officers club, which he was a member? I said, sure. Get something to eat. I said, sure. So he took me home, changed clothes, went to the officers club. And as we went in there, they had a master at arms with some sergeant, I don't know what his rank was. And I went to pull my ID card out, and my friend said, no, I'll take care of it, don't worry. So he signed me in. We sat down in a little restaurant portion, ate, left after we got done eating, paid our bill, went over to the bar area, and sat down, had a couple of drinks. He bought one, I bought one, and then he went to the bathroom, and a man, the bar was L-shaped, a man way down at the end of the L, in civilian clothes, was talking to a fella, and I saw the fella reach in, get his ID card, show it to him, okay, and then this man walked to the next guy, and he was checking identification. So he got to me and asked me for identification. I pulled out my green military enlisted man's ID card, and he looked at it and he started hollering, "What is this? What is this? An enlisted man in my club? What is this? What are you doing here?" And my friend had come out at that time. My friend asked, what's the problem? He's a guest of mine. The guy says, well, I want to see your identification. And my friend said, he never said sir. I'd never heard him say sir to anybody. Said, I want to see yours too. So the man in civilian clothes pulled his out, and my friend said, thank you, sir. And I didn't catch on at the time. This man was the IG of Saigon, in Saigon, Inspector General. He was the big man, full bird colonel. And I'd penetrated his officers club, his words, penetrated. So he hollered and screamed at us and took us out and wanted to know who signed me, and he checked the logbook, and where I was supposed to sign, my friend had signed. Now he wanted to know how come the Master at Arms let him do that. And then the Master at Arms was sweating. He knew he was in trouble. He said, I don't remember them coming in, sir. And one of the Vietnamese over there at the restaurant portion said, oh, I think, whatever his name was, Vietnamese, was there. I think this guy had gone to the bathroom and he stood in for him, sticking up for the guy. And the colonel said, okay. And then as I'm walking out to the elevators, of course curfew had already come, he said, oh, he asked me, how many times did you penetrate the officer? How many times? I said, never. How many times did you penetrate the officer club? Never. How many times did you penetrate the officer club? Never, sir. And he said, that's better. I heard the sir that time. Then he called me back and he says, Airman, you know there's a curfew out there. I said, yes, sir. And my fear was he was going to call down to the guards and say, as soon as he steps foot off of this property, arrest him, and they could have. But they didn't do that. So.
Wow. What did you do in the days and the weeks following your discharge from the service? Well, we know.
Well,
how long before you took that civilian job, did you go back immediately to Saigon?
I got my discharge and I spent about a month home, 3 weeks a month, with all of my family lived up there. Yeah, all of my family lived up there, and in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. So I visited them all, and then I turned around and went back to.
When you came back to the United States with your family, what did you do for a career? So this is in 1974, and you came back to the United States. Did you stay in electronics for the rest of your career? I bought a store in Portland, Maine, and operated the store for a year and went broke almost to the day. I didn't know the difference between head lettuce and cabbage. I mean, they're all round, they're all hard, they're all heavy, and that was my store, a little mom and pop grocery store. So I went broke. And then I worked for Kelly Girls, doing odd jobs, whatever to get money. And then I went to work. I got a short-term job with Dynalectron again, working in Dallas-Fort Worth, Love Field, Dallas area, modifying some Sheik's airplane. We did some electrical work on that for a couple of weeks, and then I heard friends of mine had told me about a job with Bell Helicopter, had a government contract. So I went and interviewed with them. Well, no, they wouldn't interview me. They told me to go home, and then they would call me. I didn't quite understand what was going on. So I went home. I quit my job. I went home, and then they called and said, okay, we'll pay your way down, and they interviewed me and sent me over to Iran. We worked on the Imperial Iranian Air Force's helicopters, or I worked on the radios. How long did you stay there?
Stayed there until the day they kicked the Shah out. I was leaving. The family and I were leaving.
Same day?
The same day. We happened to leave it that same day. It was coincidence, but,
And you came back to the United States?
and we came back to the United States. And then I needed to get my family out. I was going to go back. At that time I was in charge of a radio shop. I was going to go back, but by that time the unrest was there, and they kept telling me, we don't know when sometimes the airplanes will take off and they won't give them permission to land in Tehran, so they'll have to go someplace else, and you wait and keep checking in every week, and once it gets secure we'll send you. But then they kicked everybody out. So a very good friend of mine, a Vietnam friend of mine, had gone through Athens, Greece, and had met a guy in a bar who was in charge of a contract maintaining radios for the Army, for the 258 Signal Detachment, I think they were. I'm not positive about it. I don't remember what their thing was. Their unit designation was. But anyhow, working for the military. So he called me and told me that that boss was going back to the States to look for employees, radio people like me. So I put my paperwork in and ended up interviewing, and they accepted me, and the family and I, in July of '79, went over to Athens, Greece, and worked on the U.S. Army at Hellinikon Air Base on the U.S. Army's helicopters. There, we were maintaining the equipment for the Army in Greece, that outfit, and an outfit in Turkey, helicopter outfit, and a helicopter outfit in Italy. All of their radios would come to us.
And how long did you stay in Greece?
I stayed about a year, I think it was, maybe two. I think 2 years. And then that same Vietnam buddy of mine had by that time gone over to Saudi Arabia. He had quit that company, went over to Saudi Arabia. No, I'm sorry. He still worked. One of our guys in Saudi Arabia had gotten drunk and was at a Army compound, and was driving home to his compound, had a flat tire, and the police came to help him change his tire as they were just driving by, so we'll stop and help him. And then they smelled the alcohol and they put him in jail like that. And they kicked him out of the country. I mean, we had some sort of diplomatic immunity. He had 3 days and he was out. So my friend that was from Vietnam went there, replaced him, and then my friend decided he didn't want to stay with the company, went on to another company in Saudi, and I requested the job. So I then took that job. It was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
And how long did you live there?
5 years. 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86. Yeah, 5 years. 4 or 5 years.
And then where did you go?
And then we were working there for the Corps of Engineers, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Then I went back to Greece, to Athens. Actually, it wasn't Athens, it was outside of Athens. It was a town called Glyfada. So I went back to Greece and I stayed there, I think, roughly a year. And then they decided they wanted to move our shops all to Vicenza, Italy. So we moved everything up to Vicenza, Italy, and stayed there close to a year. And then I decided it's time to come home and start worrying about a retirement. So at 87, January of 87, I went to work for Trans World Airlines in Kansas City, Missouri, and missed the military stuff so much.
Did you go back to
No, no.
How would you say that the military affected your life?
Well, if it hadn't been for the military, I wouldn't have a wife and 3 wonderful kids. Number one. I like the military life. I like the military. I like the discipline. And of course, I believe in our country. I believe we should have been in Vietnam. I believe we lost partly because of the American public. Even though McNamara says something different now.
Wayne, is there anything else that you would like to add that we've not covered in this interview?
Have to think hard here. Nothing military that I can think of offhand.
I'd like to thank you for your service to our country and thank you for this interview.